All right, let's talk New Orleans Saints. Look, obviously, this team has had a lot of question marks around it. A talented squad, but they've had to let a few people go to address salary cap issues. But fortunately for the New Orleans Saints, they've actually had some pieces added back into their coffers when it comes to the NFL draft. We're talking about compensatory picks. It looks like the Saints are set up really well there to make some big time moves. Let's get into the article, then we'll talk about it more on the other side. This is according to The Athletic. All right, compensatory picks are awarded to teams based on the number of compensatory free agents that leave the team. Under the rules for compensatory draft selections, a lot of compensatory here in these comments here, a team losing more or better compensatory free agents (CFA) than it acquires in the previous year is eligible to receive compensatory draft picks. Reads the NFL policy. The New Orleans Saints have received 3 compensatory draft picks this season. 5th round pick 167, 5th round pick 169, and 5th round pick 174. All right, so obviously you've had to deal with a lot of guys leaving the New Orleans Saints, but the good news is you have 3 new draft selections here to try and bolster your roster middle of the NFL draft. This could be a good sign for New Orleans as they look to rebuild their team and hopefully take that next step off of a disappointing but promising 2024 in some ways, looking at how some players performed. Obviously, Derek Carr and other guys did not go up to snuff. 2024 should be so much better. Myers, I'm curious what your thoughts are, but first, Saints fans in the comment section below, what position group do you think the Saints really need to attack this offseason? Look, obviously, there are some holes on this roster. There are some really talented areas on this roster. I love Chris Olave. I love Rashid Shaheed. Obviously, receivers are really good, but there are some weaknesses. Give us one position group you think the New Orleans Saints should really attack this offseason in the comment section below. But, Myers, what are your thoughts on this news, specifically involving these draft selections and what the Saints could do with them?
Yeah, Nick, I think if we look at the Saints and what they've received in comp picks this year, they did a really great job last offseason, making some tough cuts, bringing in some free agents, but still getting something out of the tough cuts that they had to make. You see they lose guys like Marcus Davenport, David Onyemata, Caden Ellis, Andy Dalton, and Shai Tuttle, but they also brought in guys like Derek Carr, Michael Thomas, Foster Moreau, Jamal Williams, Jarvis Landry, Kalen Saunders, and Nathan Shepard. Of course, some of those were re-signed free agents, but nonetheless, it all goes into the formula. I think this was a great job by the New Orleans Saints because they had to make some of those tough cuts, like you alluded to get out of the salary cap situation that they are in. But by getting rid of some guys that would have been big-time salary cap hits had they re-signed them and bringing in more depth, they're able to score 3 fifth-round draft picks, and then the comp pick formula, those are pretty good. That's a middle of the road. I think you can get as high as a 3rd or all the way low as a 7th-round draft pick when it comes to comp picks, and you can only get a max of 4 comp picks, so getting 3 mid-round comp picks is a pretty good deal for the New Orleans Saints, I would say. A team looking to reload through the draft to help quell this salary cap world that they are in. But like I said, this is a Saints team, the front office. I think you're slowly going through this rebuilding process, getting the new roster rolling. But if you look at how they're doing things, I think they're doing it really smart. When you're able to bring in 7 guys to bolster the depth on your roster after losing 5, I'd say 3, 4 of which were actually pretty solid starters on the defensive side of the ball. You're doing a pretty good job. So I think we need to give Mickey Loomis and co. some credit as far as their ability to navigate this salary cap situation the Saints are in, but still have talent coming in and still having resources coming in way of draft picks and things to help rebolster this roster. I'm sure they're going to get out of this situation soon.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And look, compensatory draft picks are set up as like, hey, you let a lot of veteran guys go. We'll give you some draft picks to help you kind of recoup the talent that has left your building. But the New Orleans Saints have been in such a weird situation where they've played so many salary cap games in terms of extending players, doing void years and things like that. Mickey Loomis is famously creative with how he sets everything up with regards to that. And I think one of the things the Saints have kind of been hurt on the last few years is they don't have as much young and upcoming talent, as much depth as they would like, right? There's teams like the Los Angeles Rams that have a lot of quality depth in terms of rookies coming out in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round that have made solid impacts. And New Orleans Saints, not quite the same. Now, I think the Saints here have an opportunity with 3 5th-round picks to add to that depth. But there is also the opportunity to use those picks potentially as trade capital to move up, whether it's in the 1st round, 2nd round, or 3rd round, whatever round, and try and pick up a key player. I'm thinking mainly here on the offensive line. Got to clean up that area. There's a few question marks there. But I think if they can use these picks either as draft capital in terms of trading up in the draft, getting an offensive line, this is a very offensive line heavy draft. If there's a guy they like, they want to move up to in the 1st and 2nd round, this would be the draft to do it on the offensive line. But even if they don't move up, they'll have 3 5th-round picks to really just kind of add some depth to this roster. And I think that's one of the real issues the Saints have had the past few seasons. This is not a team that doesn't have top-line talent. They've got a lot of great players, a lot of headline makers, right, in terms of how their roster is set up. The problem has been depth, right? They lose one guy to injuries. They have one guy go down, and then suddenly they're just in a total terrible situation. But even outside the injuries and the lack of depth, this is a team that people think is terrible. But the reality is, they're winning 8-9 games a year, right? It's just the fact they can't get over the hump and get into the postseason these past couple of years. I think adding, again, some key depth pieces or trading up in the draft and getting 1 or 2 key playmakers to really help out this football team will allow the Saints team to overcome those issues and make another playoff run. It's the NFC South, right? It's very winnable. Like the Falcons, to me, are good team, but terrible at quarterback. The Carolina Panthers are a dumpster fire, right? The Buccaneers, they kind of limped into the winning the division last year. It wasn't, I think, they were anything spectacular. I think the Saints are set up strong. They just need to make sure they do some smart moves this offseason, and having 3 additional 5th-round picks will help them do just that.
Yeah, Nick, and you talk about trade and draft capital. The 5th-round pick is more valuable than you would think. Sometimes Saints fans will come in and say, we got 5th-round picks. What is that going to do? What can we even do with that? You can trade up, like you said, or potentially you can trade for some veteran players that might be a little bit older but still add high impact to your team. Most notably, I think of a team like the Baltimore Ravens. They trade Kenny Young for a 5th-round pick. They use that 5th-round pick to then go get Marcus Peters from the Rams at the time, came in and instantly made a huge impact on that defense. Peters played out the rest of his contract, then moved on to go, of course, to the Raiders. Then another example for the same 5th-round pick. Baltimore used a 5th-round pick to go grab Calais Campbell, bring him into the fold on their defensive line. A high-impact, high-character guy, came in, made a huge difference in the locker room, ran the rest of that contract out, and then moved on to the Atlanta Falcons. So I think these 5th-round picks, you got to see there's a lot of great value, whether you're trading up in the draft or trading for some high impact, a little bit older necessarily, good free agent players. I think there's a lot of options the Saints can use with these draft picks.
And to your point, right, the big breaking news over this weekend in the NFL is the fact that Judy of the Denver Broncos has been traded to the Cleveland Browns for a 5th and a 6th-round draft pick. Again, Judy's a quality player. So this is a situation, like you kind of brought up there, is that the Saints could use those 5th-round picks and potentially acquire quality players. It doesn't sound like you're getting a lot of value. You hear 5th-round pick and you're like, what is that worth? Well, clearly it's worth something because the Cleveland Browns just used those picks to acquire a quality player like Judy. So I think the Saints are potentially setting up a big-time acquisition here by getting these compensatory picks.